you doing, Met fans? And welcome to another episode of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Towers, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 a month by going to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2t.org. I'm John Arezzi, and joining me, the last man to manage a New York Mets World Series team, which he will be until at least next season. He's the most tenured manager in Mets history, an analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, Mr. Terry Collins. Terry, how you doing this week?
We're doing great, John. Thanks. A tough end of the season, but an exciting season. Anyway, it was fun to watch, and so it's been a lot of fun to talk about, and we'll continue to talk about it starting today.
Yes, we will. What an exciting year it was for the Mets. We do have a big show today with the Mets season ending, being eliminated from the postseason in Game 6 by the now National League champion Los Angeles Dodgers. We will cover it here today with two very special guests. We have longtime New York baseball columnist and colleague of yours from SNY, John Harper, coming up shortly in the leadoff. And then you get the radio voice of the New York Mets, Howie Rose, for Talking with TC. A special show today about the 2024 New York Mets. All right, let's get right to the leadoff and bring back John Harper to begin the show. John, welcome back to the Terry Collins Show. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's great to be here.
Well, John, I'm glad to have you on because it's the time of year when you want to talk baseball, and you've been covering two of probably the most exciting division championships in recent years. So it's good. I'm looking forward to hearing what you saw and what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the Mets run was really tremendous to be around. I mean, I think those are the best kind of years for fans because it was unexpected. Everybody kind of considered, even Steve Cohen said it was going to be kind of a transition year, after they got rid of the Scherzer and Verlander contracts and started out so poorly. For them to turn it around the way they did and then finish, all those late inning comebacks. I mean, as a writer, you're trying to do justice to what you're seeing. It was so dramatic and so even cinematic, and so racking my brain trying to come up with the right words. But it was fun to be around it, especially late in the year. And we were just talking before we came on at Citi Field. I mean, the crowds were so into it. They really embraced Lindor, which was great to see. Finally, that contract kind of. It was kind of a thing where fans couldn't get past the contract for years. And then seeing them embrace him and sing My Girl when he come to the plate, it was a tremendous atmosphere. So really, really good. And, Yankees the same way. A little different with the Yankees because it's so expected for them to be there. But they did get to the World Series. And so now it should be a tremendous World Series.
That should be a great World Series. John, one of the things I know you guys do is you're watching the game. It gets to be the eighth inning. You're starting to write your story, so you don't have to be there all night long. You can get it in time to get it in the paper, and then all of a sudden have the game switch on you that fast. That'd be tough, man.
That's a nightmare for writers. That. I'm telling you. The ultimate was Game 6 of '86, the World Series. When I was there, and at that time, just had my little Radio Shack computer, thing. You could only see 4 lines. I had my whole column written about the Red Sox finally breaking the curse, and then here come the Mets in the bottom of the 10th with 2 outs. I wanted to throw my computer over the press box, But it was the same type of thing with some of these Mets games, with these late inning comebacks. I mean, just unbelievable some of the way the finishes, and to do it time and time again. The Alonso home run, the Lindor home runs. It was tough on writers, but it was spectacular for the fans. I can't imagine what it was like.
No, that's great.
It was amazing, and I was at those games last week at Citi Field, and hearing the fans sing my girl to Lindor. I mean, even after the music stopped, they would continue singing. And
it became such a phenomenon out there, and you're right. They would continue after the PA went off. They would continue singing on their own, and to a certain point where it kind of naturally stopped. And that what was so great that happened organically. That wasn't some marketing thing where the team come. I mean, they did bring in the Temptations, which was great in itself, but it started before that. The crowd just started doing that on their own, and that's the kind of thing that you really like to see the fans get into it. And for Lindor's case in particular, it was so great because he had some rough times when he came over with the Mets that first year, the booing, the thumbs down thing, all that stuff. And I think a lot of it had to do with the contract and him trying maybe a little too hard to live up to it. And now he played like an MVP. He probably would win the MVP if it wasn't for Ohtani. And so it just was great to see because he's really a great player.
John, I agree with that. But one of the things I think really helped, he first came over, and I know that because of the contract, he was going to be the new guy in the clubhouse. And in that clubhouse at that same time was Conforto and Jake DeGrom, who were the face of the organization. Here comes this new guy in, and there was a lot of pressure on him. I really think what the Mets did, went out and found some other veteran guys. They brought in Scherzer and they brought in Verlander. And hey, look, by the way, we've made a lot of money too. And the way they went about things, and they kind of, and I thought Buck's leadership when he took over as the manager, kind of like, hey, just play shortstop as good as you can play it, and the other stuff will take care of itself. I really think through the last couple of years, what they've done to bring other veteran guys in to kind of take the load a little bit off Francisco, and what Carlos did by leading him off this year, putting him in a whole new role. He wasn't hitting third now. He didn't have to be the RBI guy. He was a guy who got things started, and I think it changed everything for him.
Yeah, I think it helped allow him to relax. And you see it, Terry, when he's at his best, he's relaxed in the box. He's letting the ball get deep. He's not over swinging, which was a lot of his issues, especially left-handed. He's chasing breaking balls in the dirt. But I think you're right. I mean, and even this year, bringing in J.D. Martinez, I think was great for him. And even, when they brought up Iglesias, he had an impact on everybody. And so I do think he tried too hard at first, kind of as you're saying, to be that leader and be the guy, that's got to come naturally. You've been around teams, guys got to accept a new guy as the leader, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I think it did take time. And Mendoza played a big role in it. I think Mendoza turned out to be the right guy for that job. I think in a lot of ways, he had a really good feel for the game, and he didn't just manage by numbers, analytics, and all that stuff. Even I tell you, I was impressed right to the end there in Game 6. The game's getting away from him, and he brings in Diaz in the fourth inning. I'm going, whoa, but he said, I'm not letting this game get out of hand. And Diaz gives him 6 outs, and then he brought Stanek in, didn't work out as well, but he was trying to keep the game close, give his offense a chance to get back into it. And if they take the lead late in the game, then you got to figure it out at that point. But I really like that. I think he's got really good instincts for the job.
Good. I thought he did a great job. So.
John, you wrote a great piece for SNY this week. Actually, 2. One came out today on the report card for the team, and I read through that. But yesterday there was your column with the lead, "Unexpected Mets Season Allowed Fans to Dream Anything Was Possible, Even a Championship." In your years of covering the Mets and even co-authoring a book on them, put this team this year into perspective and how this 2024 team will be remembered going forward in Mets history.
Yeah, I made that point. Obviously, winning a championship is the ultimate goal. Everybody wants to win it, but I don't think that should necessarily define a season, especially a season like this, because I think now the expectations are going to start to build again, and rightfully so. But this season in particular, it was such joy. You could, as we just talked about, you could feel it at the ballpark. You could feel it being around the team. Such joy in being this unexpected team. And you can't call them an underdog because they obviously have a high payroll and all that. But the expectations weren't there. They didn't really spend last offseason at the top of the free agent market. David Stearns did a great job in bringing in guys like Manaea and Severino, guys like that. So I think there's a value in just the joy of a season like this for fans, for the players, how much, because we see it, a little bit around the Yankees. At times it almost feels like winning becomes joyless because it's so expected. So I think this will be remembered as that kind of a year. And I think, ideally for the Mets' sake, it's remembered as kind of like 1984, which kind of came out of nowhere with Gooden and Strawberry and Hernandez. And that turned into a team that, that won in 86 and probably should have won at least one or two more championships, or could have anyway. If they'd been a wild card in those eras, they would have been in every year, and who knows what would have happened. But I think '84 is a comparison. And I even a little bit of Terry's year, 2015, because remember that team was only about a 500 team at the trade deadline. You bring in Cespedes and a few other guys, and all of a sudden everything clicks and they go on a huge run. And at the time, they go to this 2015 World Series and they got all that young pitching. You're thinking, man, this is going to be a team that's going to be around for a while. But then, as we know, with pitchers come injuries, and that kind of knocked that team down a peg or two in the next few years. Although Terry did get back to the wild card the next year, but it never kind of blossomed the way it kind of expected it to at some point. So I think 15 and 84 might be the best comparisons that I can think of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And it's a team, even though they didn't make it all the way, like the 2015 team, it was like these teams, because of the chemistry, because of the magic that happens throughout the course of the season, with Terry's year in 2015, it was Flores and that storyline. It was getting Cespedes, those trade deadline moves. It was Dan Murphy in the postseason. That stuff is never forgotten. And I think this team as well is going to be one of those teams where when you look back, all right, 69, 86, 2015, 2024. I mean, these are just teams that will live in Mets history. And I think that the Mets are positioned going forward. And I want to get your opinion, John, and TC on this. Ownership led by Steve Cohen, president of baseball operations, David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza in the dugout. Are we seeing the beginning of a culture which for the first time in Mets history could be a very consistent, ongoing winning franchise as we move forward?
Yeah, I think they're positioned to, for sure, because you got what happened this year, and you got guys like Vientos, who looks like a star, maybe even a superstar in the making now. You pair him with Lindor, and we'll see what happens with Alonso. But then you got some other guys. You saw Acuna come up. And they're building through the farm system. That's been the point they've made the last few years, is Steve Cohen wants to do it that way. He tried it, kind of the instant fix with Verlander and Scherzer. It didn't work out. And at that point, I give him credit for kind of seeing that it wasn't working and biting the bullet and trading those guys and eating that salary to bring back prospects like Acuna. And I do think they're positioned to go forward because Stearns has a reputation as a guy that can find value and undervalue players maybe. And, look what the guys he brought in this year all worked out for the most part. And so you add that with Cohen's money now, and he's going to spend again, I would think, now that you got a lot of money coming off the books coming into this free agent winter. So it does seem like a formula there for success, sustained success, which, from the time Cohen took over, he's talked about wanting to be the kind of the East Coast version of the Dodgers, who are there every year because they keep bringing players out of their system one way or another. And I think you're going to see that in the coming years because you do have a really good combination now of owner, GM, and manager, as well as some of these young players. So it seems to be there for the next few years anyway.
Yeah, you hope, John, you really hope, obviously, some of the guys they got in those deals last year become the kind of players you think they're going to become. But, the one thing I really like, you create your own expectations. You're not, the media, they can say what they want. As a team, you create those, just like we did in 2015. Hey, in 2016, even though Murph wasn't there, hey, we still had a good team. So we were expected to win. Now, in 2017, the injuries, became a huge factor, which they're going to be anywhere. It's going to be a huge factor. And like John just alluded to, the issue now is how do you replace those guys? So when you have a farm system, and by the way, when I first took over the Mets, our farm system made us who we were because here came Jake, here came Harvey, here came Matz, here came Syndergaard, Darno, a lot of guys out of our minor league system. And so, yes, you have to have a strong base in your system so that you can maintain expectations with your big league club. And as long as some of your stars stay healthy, it's easier to fill in around them with perhaps young players, or even using maybe one of those young players to get a real big piece to help your big league club succeed. So I just think they're on the right track. And obviously, like John said, I think the leadership starting with Steve is off the charts great. And David Stearns, I've only met him talked to him once or twice, but you know what? He's got a proven record that, like John said, he has a feel for getting the pieces that are going to help. Not maybe necessarily those mega stars, but pieces that are going to make you better, and they've shown that this year.
Certainly. Before we wrap it up, I mean, the Mets have a lot of pending free agents. This team is obviously going to look different next year. But when you talk about, at the top of the list, Pete Alonso and how much he's meant to the franchise and the organization, and then you go into, the spark plug of this season, Jose Iglesias, J.D. Martinez, Jose Quintana, Stanek, Jesse Winker, Severino, Ottavino, Manaya, Bader. There's 10 guys there that are all free agents. Do you have any even an impulse of I think they're going to sign this guy, or who would it be most advantageous aside from Pete, because everybody wants Pete back and Pete wants it back. It depends on the money, obviously. Who do you think they should really go after, whether it's for chemistry or for whatever reasons, to bring back from this free agent class that they're going to go out there and so there's 10 guys there. Who do you bring back?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start with Manaya. I mean, he looks like, he really found something with that Chris Sale-like delivery, the lower arm angle. He was so good down the stretch. I was kind of shocked at his last game against the Dodgers, but maybe he was just out of gas. He'd thrown so many more innings than his previous few years. But he looks like a guy that should be sustainable. I think he's 32, but if you can get him, 3 or 4 years, I'm sure there's going to be other offers out there. But I would start with that.
He's got the opt-out too, right? He's got an opt-out.
I should say he's not automatically a free agent. But I'm sure he's going to opt out because he's going to get offers now.
He's got 13, I think, for the contract is 13. And even if they give him a qualifying offer, what is that, it's going to be $21 million this year for qualifying?
He's going to get multi-year offers. So I would like to see them bring him back because I think he can be that top of the rotation guy. They're going to need pitching. Christian Scott is now set back. He had the surgery. And some of these other guys that were coming in the farm system got to AAA and kind of leveled off. So you're not sure exactly what you're getting out of the farm system. So they're going to have to find pitching. Whether they go to the top of the market for Corbin Burns or somebody like that, we'll see. But I would then, I don't know. I can't see them bringing J.D. Martinez back. He looked like he ran out of gas at the end too. And they got a lot of options now for DH. They got a lot of players, depending on what they do with Alonso, of course. But, Vientos could factor in there in some ways, or he could end up playing first base if Alonso does move on. But I would hope they would find a place for Iglesias. I thought he was a really important player in a lot of ways, not just the OMG stuff. But, Terry, I'm sure has the same appreciation I do for a guy who he's got unbelievable hands. Just watching him play defense is just so much fun. He made just about every play. I know he made that one error in the postseason, but he got clutch hits. He hit 375 with runners in scoring position during the year. So I think he was a big part of what happened there. The thing is, I don't know how it work. How do I make it work exactly? Unless you're going to try and move on from McNeil, maybe trade him or something, because you got Acuna coming. You can't. I don't think you can have Acuna, McNeil, and Iglesias all probably on the same roster. So, not sure how that works. But I would like to see them find a way to keep him. I think he was really valuable. But then, to me, so much of the offseason is going to revolve around the Soto thing, the Juan Soto thing, because I got to believe Steve Cohen's going to be in the mix for going after him. If you do somehow pry him away from the Yankees and I'm sure he'll make a huge offer if he does go after him. Then does that take Alonso out of the mix to some extent? I'm not sure. I mean, who knows what Steve Cohen is willing to spend? But I think a lot of it revolves around there because if they get Soto, they can figure out a way to do other things as well. So it's going to be intriguing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree exactly what John said. I think there's going to be a lot of things, but you better get some pitching. With what they had, they showed this year with the job that Severino did, the job that Manaya did, and even Quintana. I mean, those guys were veteran guys. They came in, they ate up some innings for you. You got to have that. If you think you can go every fourth day and use your bullpen up to pitch a game during a 162 game schedule, those guys are going to be absolutely out of gas come September. So I think it's very, very important to find some starting pitching wherever you can find it. And if you got to go get Burns, then because a lot of those guys that had surgery this year, we all think they're going to be back next year, but you never know. I mean, we saw Syndergaard was out 2 years. We saw Jake DeGrom was out almost 2 years. So, I mean, you just never know about those guys coming back from surgery. So you've got to have pitching to get in the postseason. You might be able to adjust some things in short series, but 162 games, you better have some pitching. So I think when they start with their free agency, you can talk all you want about Soto, go get him, but you better get somebody on that mound that can get that other team out.
Yeah. And one thing I'm curious about just quickly is I think David Stearns does pride himself on being able to find guys like Manaea this year, Manaea and Severino. You're going to get a lot for a bargain type contract. I wonder if he's going to be willing to pay those guys now multi-year deals as opposed to finding the next Severino and Manaeas, which he seems to have a knack for. So I think that'll tell us a lot about, what he's thinking as we do get into this off season.
That's a good point, John. Good point. Yep. I agree with that.
All I know, guys, is that the postseason is upon us, Yankees and Dodgers. It's going to be a great World Series. The two top teams in baseball, the marquee players. I'd like to get your predictions, both of you, on who do you think is going to win the World Series this year?
Want me to go first? I'll go first if you want.
All right, go.
I know Terry's got that Dodger blue still in his blood, so I know where he's leaning. But I'm gonna pick the Yankees just because I feel like they have a lot of mojo going. I think they had a pretty easy road, all things considered, to the World Series. I was joking and calling it the Yankee Invitational by playing the AL Central two rounds, and because I hated to see that Cleveland team was so good during the year. They get to New York, and it's almost like they're intimidated by the surroundings or whatever. They didn't play well in those 2 games in New York, and really, they were up against it, even going to Cleveland. So, and I tell you, stop pitching to Stanton in certain situations, and stop hanging sliders to Stanton.
That's what you got to stop doing, John.
I mean, come on. I mean, make somebody else beat you at some point. That drove me crazy. But anyway, I do think the Yankees, I think it's going to be a great series, and it's great for baseball because, there's only a few stars in baseball who really resonate nationally, I think, and obviously Judge and Ohtani are two of the biggest. So I think that's going to bring people into to watch the games and maybe otherwise wouldn't watch. So that's great. I think it could be 7-game series for sure. I think these teams are evenly matched. I just feel like the Yankees have a little something going, and I like their starting pitching a little better with Cole, maybe Rodon if he's right, because the Dodgers, they're leaning so heavily on their bullpen because they got injuries. They lost Glasnow and a couple other guys, and Dave Roberts has to get to that bullpen as quick as he can some nights, and they had 2 bullpen games against the Mets in a 6-game series, so I'm a little worried about them running out of gas, kind of the way the Mets did in terms of their pen and stuff like that. So I'm going to go Yankees, and I'm going to wait for Terry to pick the Dodgers now.
Okay, I'm going to pick the Dodgers, John, because I agree with exactly what you say. But you know what? I tell you, the one thing the Dodgers are going to do, they're not going to hang sliders to Stanton. But they're not also going to let those other 2 guys – those 2 guys that are hitting ahead of him, they're the guys you got to worry about. I look at that Dodger lineup, and guess what? You got 3 MVPs in the top 3 spots, plus you got some firepower on the other back end of that. That's what I don't see the Yankees having. I don't see if the Yankees win, the bottom of that order's got to start doing some stuff. But I go back again, as I said, the one thing I like about the Yankees is their starting pitching. They're going to run 4. They can run 4 guys at you, and then if you think you're going to win the World Series by having bullpen games, that's going to be tough for them. So I think those 3 starters that the Dodgers have, they better give them quality innings so they can save that bullpen for those certain days. But you know what? I like both teams. I thought this year, because of the huge expectations going into the year, they're both there. So they've dealt with all the pressure, all the things that are expected of them. And at the end of the day, I just like the Dodger lineup throughout. So I'm going to pick the Dodgers in 7.
But Terry, you tell us, you still got that soft spot in your heart for those Dodgers, right?
I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for them, John. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
A lot of history there.
Indeed. Well, John, we certainly appreciate you coming on today very much and continue the great work. Let everybody know out there where to find you on social media and for those who have not read your columns, which I'm sure everyone has, please let them know where they can find you and where they can read more about your wonderful work that you
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do. I write for SNY.TV, which is, SNY's website, obviously. I don't, what is my Twitter? I think it's at NYNJ Harper, something like that.
We'll make sure that we put up a graphic. Uh,
Please. But yeah, I always, I post the columns on Twitter and stuff, or I guess it's called X now, whatever it's called. But yeah. Yeah, no, it's been fun. It's taken me back to my days actually kind of being on the beat. And, there's nothing, it does, it wears you out, but I tweeted this at some point. There's nothing more exhilarating than writing after a great game, like some of those games they had, and trying to find the way to express it, a way that fans will really enjoy. So that's the fun of writing. It's also what gives me a headache because writing's hard, but it's kind of fun.
Well, John, I just want to say thanks again for coming on. I love talking with you, love talking baseball with you, and hope to see you soon. So be safe and enjoy the World Series.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Terry. You too. You guys enjoy as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, over the next 2 weeks, Tunnel to Towers will be breaking ground on 2 new veterans villages to provide permanent housing for homeless vets. This week, T2T will be in Detroit, and the other groundbreaking will be in Charleston, South Carolina on Wednesday, October the 30th. Between now and the end of October, the foundation will be holding ribbon cutting for 3 new smart homes as well. These homes are specially designed to accommodate the individual needs of 3 catastrophically injured heroes. One is a New Jersey state trooper, and the other 2 are service members. TC, the work never stops for Tunnel to Towers, and you've seen their efforts of the foundation firsthand this year.
I sure have. John, I was in Bradenton when they had the groundbreaking for the Veterans Center that was going on here. But this past, a week ago, I played in the golf tournament for Tunnel to Towers in New Jersey at beautiful Liberty National. And again, just another experience that you've got to be around to see. The people involved, they came to the tournament who donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep this foundation running and so proud of it. And then the dinners afterwards, and they brought some of the wives of these first responders and some of the soldiers that they provided housing for, and to hear them talk and how it has changed their life, how it has changed the life of their children. It's incredible. And the job Frank's done, it was pretty funny. I was sitting with John Franco at a table, and Frank got up to talk, and John turned to me. He said, he's the one guy who you could walk into a meeting and say, listen, I'm only going to give this guy $1,000. And when you come out, you give him 10. He's got the best way, the best approach. And the foundation is absolutely blessed to have him in charge.
Yeah. And the mission that they're on and continue each and every day, each and every month, each and every year, they're helping so many families, first responders and military families. What they do is just wonderful, TC. We will be back with This Week in Mets History right after this word from Tunnel to Towers and Terry Collins.
Hi, I'm Terry Collins, former manager of the New York Mets. Tunnel to Towers Foundation gives the city of New York something they can actually hold on to that's really a part of them. My dad was a vet, and if you've not been in the service, you have no idea what it means to sacrifice everything for a group. Those are the real heroes in the world. Let's go Mets, and let's help the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Go to t2t.org for more information about how your donation can make a difference.
All right, now it's time for This Week in Mets History. October 21st, 2015, the Mets sweep the Cubs to win their first NL championship since 2000. Daniel Murphy named the MVP of the series after hitting .529 with 4 home runs, 6 RBIs against the Cubs. Up until that point, Murphy had homered in a postseason record of 6 consecutive games. TC, was that a series against the Cubs? Was that the most memorable one of your career, or is there another that stands out for you?
No, John, that probably was. And again, I go back and I brought it up many times. During the season, we were 0-7 against them. They beat us 4 times in New York and 3 times in Chicago, knocked us around pretty good. And so when we got in the postseason, and we knew, we were a different team probably in October than we were when we saw them in August or whenever it was. But I will tell you, we rose to the occasion, and I go back to the first 2 games in New York, freezing cold, as you can remember, and we see Lester and Arrieta, their 2 top guys, and Arrieta, I think, won the Cy Young that year. But I will tell you what, our guys rose up, and our pitching just absolutely shut them down. And it was not just our starting pitching. I remember in Chicago, I brought in Bartolo, which, I brought him in a situation where I knew, I'm looking for a ground ball to get out of the inning, and Bryant was up and a big power hitter, and Bartolo threw maybe the best sinker of his life to strike him out. And it was just the way it was. I mean, we couldn't make a mistake, and we caught them at the right time. And that was, and I remember Lucas Duda hit a grand slam in Game 4, and he came in the dugout, and we were already 3-0, and he came in the dugout and he screamed, "It's about time I helped out." everybody just went crazy over him. That was probably the most fun series I've ever had.
Yeah, Duda was an eccentric guy for sure, a little bit. Terry, I mean, at the end of that 2015 season, and like it happens with every team, including the 2024 New York Mets, that last game, whether you win the World Series or whether you got eliminated, that sense in that clubhouse when it's over, all right, this is it. Book is closed on this year. How emotional does it get for these guys, especially if, like, your 2015 team bonded? There was a chemistry. There was everyone pulling for each other. And at the end of the season, people leave. They're free agents. Like Murphy's a perfect example of what happened after 2015. And this season now, the Mets have 10 free agents. And there were a lot of emotional guys in the post-game press conferences. Sean Manaea was tearing up, and Nimmo and Alonso talking about how much he loved New York. You as a manager who got to experience that end of the season, final day, book is closed, how emotional does it get inside that locker room, and how difficult it is for these guys to part ways with people that they're not going to play with anymore?
John, it's very emotional. First of all, you just got done spending 180 days with one another for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, traveling, living with them on the road. And you become a family. You really and truly do. And at the end, it's hard because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. You don't know if you're going to be there or you're going to be gone, or and it's easy to predict stuff. But in our game, things change. And so is this the last time you're going to put a uniform on? As we saw in several guys, Michael Kadire being one of them. I mean, here's one of the great players in the game. And so that last day, win or lose, it's hard, and it takes a few days for it to really come upon you. But I walked through that locker room that last day after we got beat by the Royals, and the look in guys' eyes, you could tell see the disappointment, and yet you had to tell them this is you got to walk out of there with your head held high because there's only 2 teams left, and we were one of them. And so very, very proud of what we did. But yes, it's a very emotional time, and certainly the next couple of days it was tough.
Yeah, it's hard to go through that as a player, especially when you get that close bond with other teammates of yours. But as we'll remember this 2024 team very fondly, as we remember the 2015 team that actually made it to the World Series. It was a special year, and we certainly think that the team is really in a good place as we move forward into 2025 and beyond with what they built as a foundation.
Yeah, I agree with that, John. And I think, their leadership, starting with Steve Cohen, we all know his passion to win a World Series, a passion to have a team that you can count on, a team that, the entire organization's on the same page. You're going to see that with him. David Stern showed that. I thought what he did in midseason this year, where he could have absolutely said, with the way things went at the end of May, we're going to wait. We're just going to try to build. We're going to play some of our young guys, see what we've got, see how they're going to perform. And he didn't. He walked in that clubhouse and said, I believe in you guys. I believe in what you're doing and how you're going about it. And we're going to add. We're going to go bring some pieces to help out. And look where they ended up, because what the confidence that sends to everybody in that clubhouse, that the ownership and your front office believes in you, that sends a huge message to that ball club.
Yeah, it certainly did, and we look forward to continuing to follow this team. And now, TC, it's time for talking with TC. This week on Talking with TC, we bring back the man for all Met fans. He lives, breathes, and dies with the franchise. For all the fans listening to him on the radio broadcast of the New York Mets, he paints a picture for every game. And during the postseason, his calls, especially this year, will be remembered, not only by the fans, but the players as well. And before we bring on Howie Rose, we'd like to share his on-air tribute to the Mets as they were on the brink of going home in Game 6 of the NLCS. This was posted by Newsday's Laura Albanese, who called it a Howie masterclass. It was a fitting tribute to a team that will be remembered forever in the hearts of Met fans, told to us by their radio voice. Let's go to that right now.
If you are emotionally invested in this Mets team, and you're sad right now, it's certainly understandable. But I promise you that won't take long to wear off if it ends here, because once the immediate disappointment, if they don't pull off some kind of magical comeback here, wears off, you'll realize what an incredible ride this team took you for this year. It started out 0-5 and showed some signs of life before they fell to 11 games under the 500 mark. And a lot of people had them written off right there. And so when you're lying around during the off season, anticipating the next one, and you think about what the 2024 Mets were all about, you won't be able to keep yourself from smiling. Remember the talk over the winter, transitional year, they're punting on the season. Well, they've kicked all the way to the 6th game of the National League Championship Series. And I'll say this, on a personal level, I was 15 years old when they won the 1969 World Series. That's 55 years ago. So you can do the math for yourself. But I'll just say this about the 2024 New York Mets. This 70-year-old feel 15 all over again. You can watch baseball for a lot of years and never see the run that the Mets went on during this postseason.
You got to believe. He's a longtime radio voice for the New York Mets. It's a pleasure to bring back to Talking with TC, Howie Rose. Howie, welcome.
Hi, John, Terry. How are you guys?
We're doing great. Thanks for coming on, Howie. What a year, huh?
It was great. You know, we had a lot of fun, as you obviously remember, in 2015. And, you know, this, I would say, matched that. And if it surpassed it, even though they didn't win the pennant, it was because there were so many improbable wins. You know, all the coming from behind that they did, the dramatic home runs. And, you know, at least in 2015, when they got into mid-August, they got a pretty good idea they were going to win the division. This was anything but assured right down to the day after the schedule end to the 2024 season, because they had to go to Atlanta, play that doubleheader. They won the opener dramatically. They won the wild card series dramatically. Lindor hits the grand slam again. That series somewhat dramatically. And I got to tell you, it was as exciting a ride as I've ever been on.
You know, how you've obviously broadcasted a lot of games, I mean, throughout the years. And did you ever have so many, end of game heroics like this team put together this year? I mean, I go back to 15, and you know, there were some, you know, obviously the Wilmer Flores home run was a big one, and you know, the Duda home run was Cincinnati, and you know, Marsh home runs. But going through the year, I never saw, and it wasn't, even though Lindor stands out and Pete's home run, but I mean, they had so many guys come through. I mean, they just spread the wealth throughout the whole last 3 months of the season.
They really did. And that's what made it so, to me anyhow, unique, because as you mentioned, yeah, they had some memorable ones in 15. Remember, though, championship series, they bludgeoned the Cubs, right? It was a 4-game sweep. The first series that year against the Dodgers was spectacularly dramatic, especially with the pitching and DeGrom and you bringing Noah out of the bullpen there for that one electrifying inning. And yeah, there were some great memories there. But this thing, seemed like it was going to be over two, three, four times, and then seemingly out of nowhere came the big hit. So I'll cherish it. Let's say that it was special, and now the idea is to build on it.
How when May was over, what was your thought process when at the end of May they were 11 games under 500? I mean, could you have possibly foreseen what occurred? I mean, we all know it's a long year, but with how they played in May, what were your thoughts going into June?
Well, let's put it this way: when Jorge Lopez threw his glove into the, which really punctuated the low point of the season, which was ironically against the Dodgers right at the end of May. I thought the Mets season was going into the stands along with that glove. And now I'm thinking in the back of my mind, well, here goes. How are we going to make these last 4 months sound somewhat interesting or entertaining? Because no one could have seen what was coming. But you know what happened, Terry? There was a game very early on in June against Arizona. And it was right after Jose Iglesias had come up to the Mets. And they were being beaten soundly in the ninth inning. As I recall, they were down to their last out. They were trailing, I think, 10-2 or 10-3. And Iglesias hits this ground ball to shortstop, which for all the world looks like the final out. Well, he's going blazes down the first baseline, and he beats out a routine play. And I could not have forecast what was coming next, but that was just a little bookmark where you go, here's one guy that's a player just up from the minor leagues. And it was as though, even though they lost that game, they did score a couple of runs after that, but that kind of flicked the light switch on. It was like, okay, this guy's not giving up, and neither did the rest of them. And it was from pretty much that point on that things took off. Again, no one could have forecast what would come to pass, but at least you got the feeling right there that there would be no retreat and no surrender.
Howie, you brought up the Lopez throwing his glove in the stands. I thought the way that was handled, that, hey, look, this is not how we're going to act here. This is not how we're going to portray the kind of club we're going to be. And when they made that move and got rid of him, I thought that sent a message through the clubhouse that, hey, look, we're going to play the game right here. We're going to respect the game. We're going to respect our opponents, and we're going to go after it. And I just saw it, and I know Iglesias because I'm a big Iglesias fan because I saw him last year, the year before in Tampa Bay or in Miami, down in Miami where they didn't even give him a chance. And this guy was a pretty good player. This guy had a pretty good big league career. But when you saw a veteran come up and play the game like, hey, look, there's no tomorrow. There's no guarantees tomorrow's going to occur. I thought those two things really, really put a boost into that club. And I wasn't there. I really never got all of the details of the players only meeting that they had. Sometimes, those things can get carried away because sometimes they start pointing fingers at different directions. But they came together at that particular time. And as the season went along and you were a part of it, these guys genuinely enjoyed being around each other, no matter who it was.
That was a very interesting thing to me, Terry, is that I would say that as a group, they bonded about as well as any group that I've ever been around. And I don't know, they had fun with Iglesias and the whole OMG thing. And, JD Martinez, a veteran player, said something really profound. And I think it was at that meeting, too. He said, okay, everybody thinks we stink, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he says, everybody thinks we stink, so we stink. Okay, well, let's go out there and show them we really don't stink, or, some variable of that. And they just seem to relax after that particular meeting. And I don't know how much of a cause and effect there was because, you hear about these meetings all the time and sometimes they produce immediate results and sometimes they don't. But what really happened, I think, as a result of that was that they galvanized around where they were in the standings and said, okay, we know we're better than that, even if nobody else thinks so. So let's just go out there and have fun. Let's enjoy ourselves, and whatever happens, happens, because now there's no expectations. Did enjoy itself. They enjoyed being with each other. And look, the thing about baseball nowadays, and I think with this group, particularly this season, because there are a lot of guys who are free agents at the end of the year, I think one of the reasons, Terry, they enjoyed it as much as they did is because they knew that this was their one kick of the can. This was a bunch of guys who liked being around each other, but knew that they wouldn't be beyond this season. It's the way baseball works nowadays, but particularly with this roster and all the impending free agents. So, they made it fun to watch. They had fun with each other, but they made it fun for us to watch. And I think that's important too. And that's why the fans kind of rallied around them the way they did.
Yeah, I go back to 2015, and I had Sandy on the show one time, and I asked him, what was it about that you thought, that we had a shot and you made changes to give us a chance, all the trades you made. And he brought up the fact that they said, what, why not give it a shot here and see what we got. But when after Lopez threw that glove in the stands and their bullpen was in disarray, and they didn't just ride it. They didn't just go down and bring young guys up. Let's try this guy. They got some players, man. They went out and they said, look, we like our team, and I thought the fact that the front office, probably, I don't know if they walked in the clubhouse and said anything. I don't know what, but I'll tell you what, the confidence that they showed in this team, like, hey, we think you're better than you're playing too. And we're going to go out and we're going to bring in some help here. And I thought that sends volumes through that clubhouse that, hey, look, and I think what Martinez, I thought he said, hey, look, it's like, hey, let's have fun playing, even if we lose. Let's have fun playing because, the only thing we can do is get better. And I think all of that stuff resounded in the veterans coming in and taking over. And again, they played the game right, man. There was no jogging down first base lines. And how many times did we see, the Lindors and the Pete Alonsos? There was a play in the play. Pete Alonso beat a ground ball out the other day in L.A. I mean, you get the crap jammed out of him and yet, busted down first baseline. And those kind of things, when you're a part of those teams like that, you got to play hard because otherwise you're going to get shown up. And I thought those guys all came together with that attitude.
And I think an important component to that too, and you could certainly relate to this because you've been through it, you've done it, you've achieved it, is they had and have a manager who, forget about never letting them quit or any of the trite stuff that you hear, the consistency that he displayed from the first day of spring training right to the end of the sixth game of the National League Championship Series was as smooth as you could imagine. I didn't hear one rumble of discontent between the players, apart from what Lopez did to provide the turning point, ironically, with anything that Carlos Mendoza did or said. It was all, he so impressed me because you ask him a question, he'd look you in the eye, give you an answer. He cared about them as individuals. He'd ask about their families. He'd ask about our families and how we're doing when we get together. And I just think that he set a tone that whatever happened, it wasn't going to happen because there was going to be any panic here, because he was going to change and go up and down with the wind and the currents and all that. He was the same person and manager from the beginning of spring training as he was right at the end of the LCS. And they fed off of that, I think.
I lost you, Holly.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know where.
It's yeah.
I don't know where we. Where
yeah,
I
saw the same thing. I talked to Carlos a few times during the summer, and he asked me some questions once in a while. Of course, I just told him, hey, the game the way it's played today is a whole different than the games I saw. He asked me one time about using the bullpen, and I said, you got to remember now, my pitchers hit, so a lot of times it was dictated. The score of the game dictated them having to come out. Plus, bullpens were set up for, one-on-one matchups, not 2 or 3 innings. And I said, you've had to script 4 and 5 innings almost every night how to use your bullpen. I thought he did a masterful job with that.
He did. And they provided him support. As you pointed out earlier, David Stearns took the temperature of not only this team, but importantly, the rest of the league too. And he saw as that deadline was approaching that Atlanta was vulnerable because of all their injuries, and Arizona and in Milwaukee. Obviously Milwaukee was going to win the division, but Arizona and San Diego hadn't quite made the move yet that they would a little bit later on. So it was there for the taking. And he recognized that. They brought in Jesse Winker, who turned out to be a perfect fit for what they needed, a left-handed bat who could not only DH but play the outfield. He fit in perfectly with this group. A lot of them knew him from previous encounters, even going back to the travel teams when they were kids in Florida. And he added to the bullpen, Stanek and Maton and Buto emerged. And that's what has to happen, for a team to take that next step as they ultimately did. I thought it was a masterful job in recognizing where the race was and finding the right pieces to make them remain competitive.
So, Howie, one of the biggest questions that everybody's going to face all year long. What's your take on the situation with Pete? I know he's going into free agency. We know who his agent is.
Yeah.
You've been around him. You talk to him all the time. What he says to me in the papers is always great. He wants to be a Met forever. He loves New York. Do you see a return for Pete Alonso here?
Yeah, it's such a great question because I think I might have answered it differently even 5 or 6 weeks ago. There's a lot that goes into it, as you know as well as anyone. He's going to be 30 years old when spring training starts next year. And now they've got all of this biomechanical data and analytic related information that can best inform an organization about what this player is going to look like in year 2, year 4, year 6 of a projected long-term contract. And they make those decisions accordingly. I don't quite understand why, but supposedly first basemen have been somewhat devalued over the last few years since the Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson contract. I don't get it. I don't know why. But he's still a corner infielder who is most years going to hit 40 home runs and drive in 100 runs, even though he fell a little short of that this year. What he did in the postseason, I think might have pushed the organization in a direction which they might not have been prepared to go a month ago. So I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know that given everything I just talked about in terms of his age and what they know now, how guys are going to age, I don't know that they might have had as much of an appetite for that before the postseason as they might now. But if you ask me, I don't know that they're going to want to go beyond 3 years, even if it's a gigantic money for him. Maybe that's changed. I know one comes back because I think he genuinely loves being a Met and having to do with New York what he's had to do. If he stays, he's going to become the franchise's all-time home run leader next year if he stays healthy. I hope he stays. I think maybe the postseason has pushed it a little above the 50-50 mark that I think it would have been before we got to the postseason. So, back me against a wall. Is he going to be here or not? I think he's going to be here, but I'm nowhere near sure.
Yeah, I don't know all that data that they have now, and obviously, it's based on the whole the whole population of all the players in recent times and what they've done. But you know what? There's always that exception. There's always that exception to the rule. I thought knowing Pete, a lot of pressure on him all season long because putting up numbers and being a free agent. I've seen a lot of guys going in their free agent year. Some of them have huge years and some of them don't have as good of years because there's so much, I got to get a hit. I got to hit a homer. I got to drive in these runs, and when all of a sudden, when you relax, when you get that deal and you're okay, the game becomes fun again and it becomes almost easier to play. But we do know, I know one thing, he's wherever he ends up, he's going to get some money. Because that agent that he's got has proved it time and again that you're going to, if you have to overpay a little bit, that's what's going to happen to keep Pete. So I think he's going to stay a Met myself. I do think, what I'm seeing, the numbers that are being talked about right now, I can see it being more than that. And so, but I just hope he stays because he genuinely has shown everybody that not only can he play there, he can be a star in New York.
I absolutely hope he stays. And I think one other thing that it becomes intertwined with is their potential pursuit of one. because we know that's going to come at dollars that we can't even imagine yet. And I don't know. I get the feeling, maybe you see it differently, Terry, but I get the feeling that Soto wants every last nickel that's going to be available to him on the table. Even if the Yankees win the World Series and he's the World Series MVP, I think he's going to want to cash in on that and take every last dollar that's out there. So if the Mets are going to pursue him, I don't know how that reflects upon what they'll be able or willing to give Pete and whether they're, mutually exclusive. But that's going to be interesting to watch too. In other words, do they go full bore for Soto right from the get-go of free agency? And does Pete have to wait until they realize where they're at as far as Soto goes? I think that's going to be interesting to watch too, and how long it plays out. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Bryce Harper get all the way to spring training when he was a free agent before he finally signed with Philadelphia?
He did.
There's go that route too, and how that affects Pete remains to be seen. I think that's an interesting dynamic as it relates to Alonso.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you got to be careful once in a while. This is your guy. This guy's a homegrown player, and he's a star in Queens. So you got to be a little careful of embarrassing him. I told you, you and I have talked about it many times. Big league players do not like to be embarrassed. And then all of a sudden, here's Pete Alonso, and you're going to say, well, before we deal with you, we're going to see if we can get Soto. If I'm Pete, I'm going to say, you know what? Hey, look, I've proved I can play here. And by the way, as we know, playing in Citi Field is not like playing in Yankee Stadium. I'm sorry. And if I'm a player and I'm going to live and die by the numbers, I'm going where I can put up big numbers. You'll always make the money. And there's so much money you can ever spend anyway in your entire life. I'm going to go where my numbers will dictate being a star. And so I just think there's some, like you said, they're going to be walking on eggshells here, not to make Pete say, look, you know what? If you want this other guy so bad, I'll sign with the Yankees. I'll go put up numbers in Yankee Stadium you won't be able to catch. So I just think there's some real challenges ahead.
That's a risk too. The whole Yankee angle. Do they want to see him go cross town any more than the Yankees don't want to see Soto go cross town? This is going to be a pretty interesting winter.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, well, Howie, I know you got it going on. I know John's got questions for you, so we'll bring John back on. And
hey, John.
Hey, pleasure to have you here, Howie. And what a national season. That conversation about Alonso. I always thought about that. Let's say if Cohen goes full bore to get Soto, and he's going to throw the bank at Soto. The Mets and the Yankees have never really competed in this free agency market like they could this year. And the Yankees may have need for a first baseman. Rizzo is, in the tail end of his career, you would think. And Pete loves New York. That would be a very interesting dynamic if the Mets get Soto and then Alonso goes over to the Yankees. I mean, that would be crazy. What a rivalry would be after that.
I don't know the right adjective or word to describe what that would be. I think crazy just scratches the surface, really, because you're right. There's never been an all-out battle for a marquee free agent between the Mets and the Yankees. I mean, to an extent, maybe Carlos Beltran. When the Mets signed Beltran, the Yankee, he clearly, at least based on everything that was reported back then, and this is the winter of, 2004 going into 2005, so exactly 20 years ago, a lot of the narrative was that Carlos really, really wanted to go to the Yankees, and reluctantly accepted the big deal with the Mets and Omar Minaya. And congratulations to Omar, by the way, one of the great people in baseball who is now with the Yankees in their front office. And he's got a shot at a World Series ring. And I don't know anybody in this game who has a bad word to say about Omar Minaya. I love him. He's a wonderful person. So congrats to Omar. But he was there when the whole Beltran thing was playing out between the Yankees and the Mets. And Beltran eventually signed with the Mets. That's the closest I can come to any kind of a full-scale battle between the Yankees and Mets for a marquee free agent.
It's going to be a fascinating postseason for sure. But throughout the lead up to the 2024 postseason and during the postseason, you made several memorable calls that will be remembered in Mets lore all time. Perhaps the most memorable one was the one you made following Pete Alonso's home run to make the Mets put them over the top against the Brewers in the NL Wildcard Series. Your call of Alonso's game-winning home run will live forever. I want to play that historic call, and then I have a question for you on the other side.
Sure.
3-1 to Alonso. Williams sets. Here's the pitch. Swinging a fly ball to right field. Pretty well hit. Frelick back at the wall. He jumps. It's gone. He did it. He did it. Pete Alonso with the most memorable home run of his career. Pumps as fast as he rounds second. It's a 3-run homer. He's given the Mets a 3-2 lead. They all pour out of the dugout. Alonso on his way to home plate. They're waiting for him. He hits the plate. He is first congratulated by Nimmo, hugged by Lindor. There are a dozen Mets waiting for him outside the dugout. Pete Alonso keeps this fairy tale season going with the fairy tale swing of his career. 3-2 New York.
You get cold chills listening to it today. Time I hear. But where does that moment stand with some of your other historic calls of home runs? And describe what it meant to you that the Mets actually played that call for the team on the plane, and you had that back and forth with Alonso. Where does that stand?
Well, that last part of it was nuts. And I mean, Terry can certainly agree and understand that we, meaning the broadcasters, we don't venture back there. You know, they might as well be in a different zip code from where we are on the plane. You know, that's their world. You know, we don't invade their space on the plane, even though we're all part of the same traveling party. There's a certain respect for that. So when I got onto the plane, and a few of them had heard it already because it doesn't take long nowadays, as you notice, to circulate on social media. One of the Mets executives decided to play it over the loudspeaker, and that's what you saw and heard if you saw that clip. Ending up going back there. It meant everything. You know, it's I guess, you know, from the players, it's a certain validation that they understand and like what you do, at least in that moment. And that meant a lot to me. But in terms of where it sits on my all-time favorite calls, I guess that's more for others to decide than it is me. But what I loved about the moment was what it represented. I mean, they were dead on the water pretty much going to the ninth inning. Their season was 3 outs away from the first tee, you know, and then seemingly not out of nowhere because it was representative of what he'd done all year. The one thing that I think gets lost in that shuffle is Lindor had a great at bat to begin that inning. You're down 2 runs. You need one base runner to get the tying man to the plate, and Lindor had a terrific at bat, worked out the walk. And what happened? I think Nimmo singled somewhere at the corners and 1 out now. And then Pete hits a home run for, as far as the Mets are concerned, the ages, because he just lifted them up by the collar and brought them from behind. And now anything was possible because they go ahead, they add a run, which was huge. And Peterson shuts him down in the bottom of the ninth inning. It was just, if it wasn't magical, it was the closest thing to magic.
Well, certainly was magical for everybody that heard it. But how at the end of every season, whether it ends well or ends with disappointment, players get traded or they leave for free agency. Change is always inevitable, as you and TC just discussed. There's always change at the end of a season. Taking that into consideration, what are your hopes as the Mets now seem to have a great foundation, ownership, leadership with David Stearns, in-dugout leadership with Carlos Mendoza? What are your hopes for the Mets as they now build their 2025 team?
Well, I think anybody connected with a club hopes that they can go, 5 wins more than they did this year, right? But you pointed out the most comforting part of that building scenario, and that is this sort of synergistic relationship that exists between ownership and upper management and the dugout. And it's as harmonious as any relationship of that nature that I've seen with the Mets in all my years covering them. And it just bodes very, very well for the future. I think any Met fan can sit back and confidently say that the right people and pieces are in place to put something together that is, in Steve Cohen's favorite word about this, sustainable. That's his goal, and they've got the right people there to do it. It's evident to me why he held out as long as he could waiting for Dave to become available. And I just think those very important administrative pieces are in place to take this franchise where it wants to and needs to go.
Thank you. I got one more for you, and then I'll turn it back to TC. Give us your reflections on how announcing the 2024 New York Mets compares to other years that you've been behind the microphone, and even maybe as a fan before you joined the team. Is this one of your favorite seasons ever?
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. A lot of times, your favorite seasons are the ones that are least expected. I go back to 1984. The Mets had been a bad ball club for a long time, and then Davey Johnson took over as manager. Darryl Strawberry had been Rookie of the Year the previous season. Dwight Gooden was a rookie in '84, and Davey fought Frank Cashin to bring Doc north, and we know what happened. And you could see everything beginning to blossom. '84, beautiful 6-month spring day you could imagine, because it was the portent of a beautiful summer. And they won 90 games in '84. This is before wild cards. Now, remember, they won 89 this year, and they got the third wild card spot. But back then, you had to win the division to get in. So they won 90 games in '84. They finished second. They won 98 games in '85, and you knew they were ready. And they made the deal for Gary Carter between '84 and '85, and then in '85, '86, that winter they brought in Bobby Ojeda and Tim Tuffle, and Davey said they were going to dominate, and they did. But all of that was seen through the lens of '84 and what you could see coming. So I liken this season very much to that.
Well, I appreciate your time. As always, I'm going to turn it back to TC.
Okay, thanks, John.
John, I will tell you, all the years I've been around Howie, and I did some broadcasting with him a couple of years ago. We went to Miami, and when you hear him do those classic home run calls and stuff, and you're sitting next to him, I mean, you can't have nothing to say. For innings, there's nothing you can't add anything to it. And so, I've been around him. I've heard, I've heard a lot of the broadcasts and worked with him to watch him prepare and how he goes about things. And unless you know what it's like to do his job and then to do it at a Hall of Fame level like he does it, it's incredible. My first time I ever sat in that booth and watched these guys do their jobs, I shook my head. Because, I just figured they're calling, they watch the game and call the game. But there's so much more going on around them. It's really, really amazing. And Howie, I'm really proud to have you as a friend. But
thank you.
I will tell you, and this is a true statement. I have a lot of friends who turn the Mets games on and yet turn Howie Rose on as they watch the game. So that to me is the ultimate honor.
I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate that. Right back at you. Appreciate, proud to have you as a friend. But I'll tell you one thing, for everything you just talked about, I like your chances of sitting in my seat and doing play-by-play a lot better than my chances of going into that dugout and managing a baseball game. Trust me, your job is way harder.
Well, I will tell you, this job's hard enough that I'm doing right now. So that other thing, I have absolutely no desire to do. One time, I had dinner one time with Sandy Alderson when I first got the job, and we were talking, and he said something about me being the manager and he's the general manager, and I stopped him and I said, understand something, I don't ever want to be a general manager. I'm happy where I'm at right now, and as the color guy who did a game with you, I was very happy to sit next to you and never have to worry about doing what you do. So I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, and that's as far as it's going to go. But
open invitation.
I just got to tell you, I know John's probably got some fan questions for you, but thanks again for coming on again, and tremendous season, fun to watch, fun to listen to. So thanks again for coming on. So John, you got questions?
My pleasure.
Yeah, actually, it's not a fan question, but it's just personal memory of you, Howie. I remember back, I believe it was 1980. I believe 1980. I think you were working for Sports Phone at the time.
A little before that. By 80, I was already at WHN radio, but Sports Phone was like 75, 6, and part of 7. Yeah.
Oh, it was around that, because I had remembered you in the press box and how you were calling in these reports like every 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I just remember, I was like, this guy is good. I'm sitting in the back. I'm a college student, and I got access to the press box and did some interviews. But I was just looking at you, and I was like, this guy is going to be great. I mean, he's just so great. And I'm one of those guys that when the playoffs were on, I'd not listen to the national broadcast. I'd sync up that radio broadcast to hear you. And I just have to say thank you for all the years you spent. And my final question for you is like, are you going to give it another shot next year? Are you coming back for another year?
I'll do next year for sure. I'm signed for next year, and I'm just taking it 1 year at a time after that.
Well, it's been wonderful listening to you it is every season, this season.
I appreciate it.
I want to thank you for coming.
My pleasure, guys.
Howie, let's get together when you get down to Florida.
I will, absolutely. You want to come down to Ibis and see some hilariously bad golf? I'd love to have you one day. It sets back the game.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. All right, thanks so much. Thanks. Be well.
All right.
We'll talk to you.
All right, Terry. Howie Rose, as always, so eloquent. The storytelling, the chemistry between you two, and he's one of a kind. There'll never be another like Howie Rose.
You're absolutely right. He's outstanding. He makes the game fun to hear. When I was growing up, the only game you watched on TV was the Saturday game of the week with Mel Allen. He would do the game. So you had to listen to the radio. And so I was very, very fortunate. I listened to the Tiger games. And so we had George Kell was one of the first guys on. And he was so fun to listen to, and that's how you learned the game. And Howie Rose, and you said it many times, he paints a picture for you. That you listen to the games and you can see the action happening. And, when I took over as the manager after my first year, because they traveled with us, and I saw the passion that he and Gary and Keith and Ronnie had to be around the passion they had for Mets baseball, that I started, I had to do a pregame press conference and a postgame press conference. And in my pregame press conference, you have all the writers in, and whether it's home or away. When we were on the road, because a lot of times at home, when you were done, they all went about them. But on the road, the writers would leave, and I kept those guys in. I kept Howie in. I kept, Wayne Randazzo was his guy at the time, and the television guys. And I let them ask me questions that sports writers didn't need to ask. I let them in on some of the things that were going on so that I could help them going through a broadcast like, geez, how come he's not getting so-and-so up in the bullpen when they know this guy's not available tonight? I don't want the other team to know it, but I thought it was important for them to know it so that they can paint a picture for the fans and let them say, I'm not really sure he's available tonight. So, because of doing so, I cemented a relationship with Gary and Howie that I've kept to this day. And I thought it was a big move to make, and they are very, very good friends. And I think that, that relationship we got in throughout, now it was just 2015, even before that, when we were trying to build our club up, they were on top of things. And I just thought it helped make their broadcast a little bit better.
Well, to develop friendships and, obviously the mutual respect. And even though they don't put on a uniform, Gary and Howie, they are part of the family. They are part of the team. And I think the New York Mets organization has the very best when it comes to television announcers and the radio announcers as well. All right, Terry, it's time for another Tunnel of Towers Amazing Hero of the Week segment. And this week, we're going to take a look at New York Mets legend Johnny Franco and his involvement with T2T.
How's it going,
John,
Lenny, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys. Hi, I'm former pitcher John Franco of the New York Mets. Let's go Mets, and let's help the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. On 9/11, the team was in Pittsburgh, and the plane hit the World Trade Center. I immediately called home, and as I was on the phone with my wife, I saw the second plane hit. Born and raised here. This is my home. It's like a punch in the stomach. When I talk about it now, the hair stands up in my arms. I think about, obviously, the people who weren't firemen and policemen, who went to work that day just to put food on the table for their families. You think about the firemen who went into that building. You can't forget them.
This is the street sign. This is the door from the engine.
Coming down here at ground zero, we weren't sure if it was the right thing to do, but we wanted to help any way we can. But then when we got down here and we saw the firemen and the rescue workers, you know, with all the soot on their face and sitting down, resting, and you could see how exhausted and sad they were. When there's a building on fire, most people are running out. These guys are running in. And for us to bring a t-shirt or a hat to them, you know, they saw us, they smiled, they thanked us for coming down, you know, make them forget for what they were doing just for a second. It made us feel good about that. We put a small Band-Aid on a big wound.
They fought for us, they sacrificed.
I know Frank Stiller, who started this Tunnel to Tower, and what they're doing around the country is an amazing job. I take my hat off because they are giving back. Their brother is a true hero. You know, he was in Brooklyn, ran through the tunnel with his gear on. I mean, what more could you say? There's a reason why people from all over the world, all over the country come here to see that great tribute to all the fallen heroes and all the souls that were lost in the World Trade Center. Those 2 holes in the ground mean a lot to this country.
By giving $11 a month, you're joining us on our mission to do good. Go to T2T.org to make a positive impact.
We'll have another T2T Amazing Hero on next week's show. Terry, before we wrap it up today, Major League Baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, the other teams he was with, lost somebody very special at a very young age. Fernando Valenzuela passed away yesterday. You and I spoke before we started taping today, and of course you knew him. I'd like you to give your memories of Fernando and share a story or two, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, yeah, I was managing in the minor leagues with the Dodgers when they signed Fernando. He came upon the scene in spring training, 19 years old, and, you know, pretty good pitcher, great command, great sense of the game. And then he learned the screwball from Bobby Castillo, who was a big league reliever with the Dodgers at the time, and he perfected it. And his poise, his grace, and I will tell you, one of the funniest, best people you will ever meet. Learned English fast from a little town in Mexico where I happened to manage in winter ball, Navajo, Mexico. Did many things in the city of Navajo to help the people out, but became an absolute icon in Major League Baseball with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Fernando Mania, I mean, you know, the Mexican crowds, the Mexican heritage in the city itself came out in droves and supported him. But he took that and then went into his broadcast side of things, and with the same humor, the same great character that he was, same love of the game. And baseball has lost one of the great players and great people that I ever had the pleasure of being a friend of.
Yeah, and I remember his debut season, his rookie season, when he won Rookie of the Year and Cy Young in the same year, the only player ever to do that. So
John, the Dodgers had a pitcher named Jim Brewer who threw a little screwball. And when Fernando burst on the scene with his screwball, they hired Jim Brewer to go through the minor leagues and watch pitching and find anybody that he felt could learn a screwball because of the way their delivery was, the way their hand action was, and to teach them the screwball. And Jim Brewer turned our minor league system pitching. I mean, everybody became better because of Jim teaching them how to command different pitches. And so Fernando even had an impact on the minor leagues, even though he was a big league pitcher.
Wow. Great stories. Thank you, Terry, for sharing your memories of Fernando. He certainly will be missed. That'll wrap up another edition of the Terry Collins Show. Follow Terry on X and Instagram at TerryCollins_10. And you can subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platforms or on YouTube. Just look for the Terry Collins Show. And this week, we want to close out this episode with a video that the Mets sent out to their fans this week. A thank you from the New York Mets. For Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. Have a great week, everyone.
Right to there, nice and loud for me.
Thank you, fans. I never got a chance to thank you, and I'll tell you what I thank you.
I've always take pride on taking time to give the autograph to the kids and to people that want it because I was there. I'm still a fan.
Swing and a drive. Well hit right center. Onto the track. It's gone.
Hey, this place is lit. This place is unreal.
How can you not be excited playing here, right?
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. You girls make the world go round.
The support from our fan base has been incredible.
Thank you guys for coming out and witnessing this.